Hello, friends. This is Reflections, a program sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where together we do God's work with human hands. I'm Karen Winkel. I pastor United Church of Paducah here in Paducah, and our other co-host is Gregory Waldrop, who pastors Fountain Avenue United Methodist Church. Gregory, good to see you today.
Glad to be right here with you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and glad to be here with you all as well. Regularly on our program, we invite pastors in and we take a look at passages from the scriptures and get the insights from across the denominational lines about the power of the scriptures. We're continuing our journey through the parables in Luke, and we are very glad to have Father Pat Reynolds from St. Thomas More Catholic Church here with us. Welcome, Father Pat.
Pleasure to be with you. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, and we have Ben Boone, who is the pastor at Lone Oak United Methodist Church. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Gregory. Karen, good to be with you today. You too, Pat.
Yeah.
Good to be with you.
Yeah. Anything particular going on in your part of the world, in the churches you serve, or in your lives you want to share with the church here, with the viewers here?
Well, during this season, people are thinking about giving, and we have a giving tree in our gathering space, like a lot of churches do, I'm sure. But I think we had over 800 tags this year of that are to help, needy, especially children in the area, and just to see the turnout of people just taking those and bringing these wrap packages back. So next Sunday, you can hardly move to the gathering space of the church because of so many people reaching out to, especially little ones in the community. So that touches my heart, I think, more than almost anything else this time of year.
Great.
Yeah. This, of course, is always a season of giving and sharing. And it comes upon us whether we're ready for it or not.
Right.
And the exciting part about that is that, like with you, Pat, our congregation has a number of different areas that they become involved in, whether it's PCM or West Kentucky Family Services, other responses. Our youth out in the rain Sunday night collected food at Noble Park. And so they got a little wet, but enjoyed that opportunity. And
Neat.
So there are opportunities like that, not only to bring something and share, but to be involved.
That's great.
And to be active, and that's good.
It is good.
That gives us an opportunity to really give of ourselves.
Yeah.
And be active like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into our study today. We're spending some time with the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and an interesting parable to grapple with in the month of December, at a time when we're preparing for the humble birth of our Savior. And so this comes from the 16th chapter of Luke, verses 19 through 31. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." He said, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent." He said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead."
Mm.
This is the word of God for us, the people of God. May it come to life in us.
Mm. Thanks be to God.
Vivid parable.
It is.
Yeah.
And like is often the case, when Jesus starts talking about the afterlife, it's not always intended to tell us about just about the afterlife. As we're not, I don't think, here to gain the geography or the terrain of the afterlife from this parable. I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind here.
And if you look at the context for that parable, it goes back to really verse 14, where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and they have laughed at him because of his teaching on separating God and money. One cannot love God and mammon. And so they laugh at Jesus' teaching at that point. And so then Jesus, in this piece, at least it seems to me, begins to tell a story related to wealth and social relationships, interaction between people,
Right.
rather than it being a story of the afterlife.
Right.
It's how we relate to each other.
Right. I'm reminded in this season particularly of one of my favorite secular books, which is Charles Dickens's Christmas Carol, who also takes us by way of fantastic vision and dream and into the afterlife and to ancient history as well. And in order not so much to tell us what the afterlife is going to be like, but to make sure we know how important our everyday choices are, how our everyday connections, relationships are.
Yeah.
And I think you're very right about that.
I think we're so, by nature, we're so attracted to stories and great storytellers, and especially this time of year. But Jesus was the master storyteller, and there's so many parables that he told. I think I read that there were maybe 40 some odd parables that are in the Gospels, but this is the only one that has somebody by name. That he gives a name.
Yeah, and he's the poorest. The poor is the poor.
Lazarus, and my translation of ancient languages is not so great, but it comes from help, or a helpless one, or maybe just help. So this is the guy who's in great need of help.
Another take on the name Lazarus is God helps, or God is helper, which is an interesting kind of reversal, because given the context, one would think that the rich man, who's not named, by the way,
right,
would be the one who God is helping.
Right. Who's the most well known.
Exactly.
Whose name would be most memorable.
Exactly. He's wealthy, he's blessed, and yet in Jesus' telling, a marvelous way of telling the story to really twist our minds with a reversal, that it's not the wealthy one who is named, but it's the poor.
Yeah.
And God is helper, which is another interesting little twist that Jesus provides for us in this story.
Yeah. But I guess when I was little, we traditionally called him Dives, which is Latin for just a rich man. So it's just a take on who he was.
Right.
But even the descriptions of the rich man, like how he dressed, I mean, that was, I guess, how the high priest dressed, just that luxurious, and then and he ate sumptuously every day too, which is so different from the common person who, I think maybe had meat once a week or something.
Right.
And so it's just showing the exorbitance of this man's lifestyle compared to.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested that the description of their relationship, because it doesn't say he was he was mean to the poor
No.
man. It doesn't say he was, acted hostile towards him or was opposed to him or shooed him away from his gate or anything else. It just said he didn't pay any attention to him at all. He just
He was
ignored
indifferent.
He was invisible.
He was invisible.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested that it doesn't take an active kind of a refusal here. It just something as simple as ignoring somebody or not seeing somebody.
Until he has need.
Right.
Until
Right.
he has need. I have an idea for this fella. He can help me.
Really.
And even then, though, he does not, the rich man does not address Lazarus, he addresses Abraham.
Right.
Still, even in death, that indifference or that ignoring, sense of being ignored and ignoring, continues.
Right.
So the rich man addresses Abraham and asks for send Lazarus to dip his finger in water so I can have a drink. It's still, Lazarus is unrecognized and unknown in some sense.
Yeah. In a church, the church that I served last, we hosted a soup kitchen every Sunday, and the same folks, a lot of the same folks always came. There were all kinds of different folks that came in Sunday, randomly every Sunday, but there was a little cluster of about 25 or 30 people that came in every Sunday, and we got well acquainted with, and the people in my church were really, it was a great interaction. And one day, one of my favorite friends in the church came in and just in tears and said, I saw this lady who had come to the soup kitchen regularly for the last 4 or 5 years. She said, I saw her out picking up cans today as I drove in. And of course, I wanted to tell her she's been picking up cans for 10 years that I've been around, but I didn't. She said, but I saw her today picking up cans for the first time. And she said, I felt like it was my sister out there picking up cans, and I really feel compelled to go out and help her pick cans up. And I bowed my head and thanked God that day, because in some ways, that's what that soup kitchen did for us, is it opened our eyes to the people that were absolutely physically the closest to us, that were invisible until we knew them, until we saw them as a brother or a sister. It really was an acting out of this parable in a powerful way for me. Really.
A couple of years ago, with our faith formation program, which is all our kids that are in public school, we have religion class every Wednesday night for them. And they'd done a food drive for PCM, and they just collected lots and lots of food. But we decided to do a famine meal, just to show the disparity between the rich and the poor in the world, and kind of based on this gospel and several others in Matthew 25. And so, 2/3 of the kids were on the floor and got a rice cake and a little cup of water. And then there was a middle table with a couple tables, maybe where kids got some snacks and an apple. And then one table with maybe 6 or 7 kids who had a really sumptuous meal. And it just made an impact on those kids to realize that all of us are the rich person. I mean, we can substitute our name in that gospel, and just to realize that just a good chunk of the world it's like Lazarus. They're helpless, or it seems that only God is their helper. And so that should redouble our efforts and at least our thoughts that there's a lot for us to do in this world, locally and globally too.
I served a church outside of Memphis one time, and we were collecting food for our youth. Collected food in the neighborhood for neighborhood centers in downtown Memphis, and went to a house. And coming back from that house, one of the teenagers said, "I don't know what this food is." It was commodity food. They had gone to a house of someone who had received commodity assistance, and they had given generously some it was some pork and some peanut butter. And there was that sense of, I don't understand, I don't know. And I said, well, that's commodity food. That's food that the poor have. And that caused them to see some things differently, and even to recognize a neighbor differently than they had recognized him before. A reversal of thinking.
Greg, I'll pick up on what you said a few minutes ago about the rich man. He wasn't malicious to this poor Lazarus. And I mean, at least he allowed him to come to the gate or around the table in the courtyard. And I was just thinking, if any of us had someone like that hang around our house or our church, you know, we'd call the sheriff's department or we'd call the police to get rid of them. Or the rich man didn't do that. I mean, he at least allowed him to stay. But his sin was, of course, just not even seeing him. But so in some ways, we need to insert our names in that gospel and help us examine our own attitudes.
Right. I one time preached out of Genesis about God will provide. You know, that whole sort of Abraham theme that runs all the way through, and sort of highlights there at the Abraham and Isaac sacrifice text. And God will provide. God was confident about this, and I thought I'd done a pretty good job until one of my family members from a larger family who happened to be there came up to me and said, you know, you don't need to preach that too smugly. She said, you know, my mother was one of the most religious persons in the world where we grew up. But there were many nights when my sisters and I had to split an egg 5 ways for supper. And she said, it didn't feel like God was providing. And so I went back to that text particularly, and it's a part of this text as well, and I began to realize that in the Abraham text, particularly, God provides on the basis of an attentive follower. Abraham's always saying, here am I, Lord, here am I, Lord. All the way through those, he's always saying, here, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. And I ultimately went back to this person and said, you're exactly right. And I want to apologize to you for the church. There was plenty of church where she grew up. There was plenty of people that had the awareness of this family's plight, but nobody attentive, nobody who responded, nobody who paid attention. And so the God doth provide is at least in part dependent on faithful people saying, here am I, Lord, send me, do what you call me to do. I'm open to your voice and your call. That's
where, when you're talking, Pat, about reading our names into the parable, really claims me at this point, because to hear my name in there reminds me that that one of the ways God does provide in the world is through us. One of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways God provides for response to the need of persons who are in need. It's through you and me, through us as individuals, through our congregations, through a community. God uses people in those kind of circumstances. This parable to me really connects with a whole sense of reversal, where at the end the rich man is he's fearful that his family will grow up not seeing, as he grew up not seeing. And so he wants them to be helped. There's that sense that the parable pushes us to meet this reversal that God seeks to bring in our own awareness, in our own lives. And we see it in the rich man. It's not a little too late, because if we read our names into the story, then we're being invited to be aware of
Right.
people in need, be aware of even our own needs.
I was at a family's recently, and we had a nice dinner, and they were playing Scrabble afterwards. And I like Scrabble. I don't play it a lot, but I was helping one of the kids, and somebody put a word down that crossed another word, and they got all these double points.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know that you can do it that way. And then somebody said, no, you can't. And then someone said, yes, you can. So they pulled out the rules. And they said, see, it's right here in the rules. And I said, well, I never knew that. And I was thinking of this story about, send someone from the dead, Father Abraham, and warn my brothers. And he said, well, they've got the message. They've got the instructions, they've got Moses and the prophets and everything else. Listen to them. And so maybe we've got all the instructions here,
Sure.
It's just a matter of let's bear down and find out what they are and read them and share them with others.
And being attentive.
And being attentive.
Yeah.
One of the things that this makes me think about, though, is as you're talking about that, I served a church in Utah in a community that was really built on a mountain slope. And one of the things that was really hard in a congregation of folks that were collectively fairly affluent was that it was hard for them to see the folks who had need of them, because they were busy looking higher up on the mountain to who had more, so that they themselves, even though they had lots, felt that they were living modest lives in contrast. And I kept saying, don't look up the mountain, look to the flats. Look to the flats, because those folks are looking to you. And I think one of the things that makes, this is a culture that encourages us to look at many of the things that really ultimately deprive us of life, that don't provide life.
It's lifestyles of the rich and famous, isn't it? It's not of the poor and marginalized. They don't get much TV time, do they?
Yeah, exactly. But as I'm thinking about this, I spent time on the Navajo reservation where poverty is the extreme poverty is the norm in many of those communities, and all of a sudden, those from an affluent culture realize that they have need of what the Navajos have to give, and that happens in many Native communities. There's a spirituality there that has remained life-giving. And is appealing.
Right.
And so often when I was there, I felt like in a way I had to kind of protect the Navajo from the folks who, kind of like this fellow, these folks have something I need now. We want to be close to the land. We want to be in touch with Mother Earth. And the interest was not entirely genuine, and there wasn't an opportunity for education to happen. It was serve me in my need. And that, I think that can happen, and particularly in a season when we're focused on addressing some of the needs that have gone unmet. I think the task is that we be changed by that, not to provide an opportunity to congratulate ourselves on our largesse, but which is where this fellow missed out. He missed out on a relationship while he was alive that could have been life-giving and could have been perspective-giving.
Right. I mean, and that's a part of the repeated refrain of the biblical witness, isn't it? I mean, it's the slaves that end up becoming the promised people, and it's the minority report that finally gets people into the promised land, and it's the one born in a nowhere place, Bethlehem, in a manger, that is the Savior of the world, and it's sort of this repeated refrain. It's kind of the way God does God's work, or at least one of the ways, one of the main ways.
The part of the struggle, I think, with that sense of God in our midst is that it's difficult to make the step then for recognizing brother and sister that exceed or that goes beyond the boundaries of wealth and poverty, that goes beyond the boundaries of race and even of creed, to recognize a deeper, wider brother-sisterhood that really is reflective in this sense of God's breaking the boundaries and not being confined to the normal, or what we would consider the kind of the normal chains of inheritance and of success.
Yeah.
That's tough, I
Right.
think, for us, for me.
And I had a professor who was great in terms of taking very seriously the images, and he said, you know, how do you think that big gulf got there? And there was a lot of different ideas. He said, well, it was dug by the actions of the rich man. He dug it in his everyday life, in his everyday refusal of that kind of commonality, that kind of relationship, and that was why it was inseparable. It wasn't. I mean, it was why it was so hard to overcome. Is because the rich man had put it there, you know, himself, or the one who'd ignored him. So.
I was reading some statistics about number of Christians who really didn't believe there was a hell, and it was a higher number than I thought. And so I think we can just refer them back to this chapter of Luke, you know, about the afterlife and the consequences of choosing ourselves and egocentric behaviors over choosing to live for God and for others.
And that is a hell, ultimately, that selfish life. Well, the parables are wonderful because they just don't have an end to the fruit that they can offer. And this time has just flown by, and it's now time to thank you. And we could continue for another 30 minutes easily.
Wow.
But Ben Boone, thank you,
Glad to be
and Father
here.
Pat Reynolds, thank you for joining us. Gregory, it's been good to be together
And
again,
you.
and it's
With
been
you.
so marvelous to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. You can check these programs again on Paducah2.org anytime you like, and do come join us again on Reflections, where with Paducah Cooperative Ministry, we're just all endeavoring to do God's work with human hands. Thank you, and shalom.
Shalom.